Weather fronts continue to drift in, but all the time, warm air never too far away from parts of England. Plenty going on this week, further thunderstorms likely.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to the briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. Today we have the latest from Northern Ireland as Boris Johnson heads to Belfast. We're talking exams as A-level and GCSEs get underway, plus the cost of living crisis our bills saw, and the government ponders what to do about it. And we talk to a whistleblower who has been punished for speaking out, and his MP. We're talking foie gras and fur too. First, here's your news with Rosie. Good afternoon, it's just 1 minute past 12. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Boris Johnson is holding emergency talks with Northern Ireland's leaders today in a bid to break the Stormont deadlock. The Prime Minister's threatened to override parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol through new legislation in Westminster, despite warnings from the EU it would breach international law. The Assembly's been plunged into crisis in the wake of local elections, with the DUP refusing to join a devolved government. Sweden will send diplomats to Turkey today in an attempt to overcome objections to the Scandinavian nation joining NATO. Applications for new membership require unanimous approval from all existing NATO members. Sweden's expected to make a formal bid today, ending 73 years of internal opposition to the move. Finland confirmed yesterday it would also be applying. Ukraine says troops defending the country's second-largest city, Kharkiv, have fought through Russian advances and now reached the state border with Russia. It suggests a Ukrainian counterattack is having increasing success in pushing back Russian forces in the northeast. Ukrainian military, though, say there's no let-up in Russia's bombardment of the steelworks in the southern city of Mariupol, where hundreds of fighters are still holed up. Footage released by a pro-Russian separatist group, but not verified, shows munitions falling over the Avestal steel plants. McDonald's says it started a process to sell off its business in Russia. The fast food giant closed all its restaurants operating in the country in March, having operated there for 30 years. McDonald's says the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine has meant it's no longer tenable to continue business in Russia. GBNews has been told that more than 2,000 people are waiting in areas around the French ports of Calais and Dunkirk to try to make it across the Channel. More people are being driven to the area daily. Our Home and Security editor Mark White's been investigating.
This morning, despite gusts of more than 30 miles an hour in the Channel, people smugglers were still shoving small migrant boats into the water. This border force rib delivering some of those pulled from a small boat just after 6 a.m. Over the weekend, at least 600 crossed the Channel, but poor conditions led to several rescues of boats in trouble on the French side of the water. There are, we're told, more than 2,000 people waiting in areas around Calais and Dunkirk for the chance to make the crossing. Sources say more are being driven in from cities, including Lille, on a daily basis. Despite confirmation from the Prime Minister over the weekend that the first 50 would-be asylum seekers have been notified they'll be flown to Rwanda within a fortnight, there appears, for now at least, to be no reduction in the numbers determined to cross. Mark White, GB News.
The London Mayor says he feels incredibly safe after reportedly being named on a kill list by a US shooting suspect. Sadiq Khan was listed in a 180-page manifesto called Kill High-Profile Enemies that had been published online by Payton Gendron. Gendron's accused of shooting dead 10 people at a supermarket in the US city of Buffalo on Saturday. The London Mayor says the best response to terror threats is resilience.
To recognise that one of the things these terrorists want us to do is to change the way we lead our lives. They want us to not come forward if you're a minority, if you're a woman. They want us to cower and be scared. We can't allow them to succeed. But make sure we're always vigilant, never complacent. The best response to terrorists is to make sure we're resilient and we don't allow ourselves to be cowards.
As school students across the country start their end-of-year exams, today, head teachers have raised concerns about a lack of invigilators. The Association of School and College Leaders found a third of schools hadn't been able to recruit enough people to supervise GCSE and A-levels over the summer. They said increased anxiety in pupils, who've then requested to sit exams in separate rooms, plus invigilators' concerns about catching COVID were some of the reasons behind the shortages. The Queen has received a standing ovation on the last day of the Royal Windsor Horse Show. She was there for a star-studded celebration of her Platinum Jubilee in the grounds of Windsor Castle. She made a couple of visits to the horse show last week, her first public appearances since March, having missed the state opening of Parliament due to mobility issues. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the briefing with Gloria.
Coming up this hour on The Briefing, the Prime Minister is in Belfast trying to get Stormont up and running. We'll bring you the latest from Belfast and we'll speak to former Northern Ireland Secretary Theresa Villiers. And A-levels and GCSEs are underway. Robert Halfon, Chair of the Education Select Committee, will tell me what students and their parents can expect. Everything is getting more expensive. Is a windfall tax on energy companies finally on the way? I'll ask Robert Halfon and Lib Dem Treasury spokesperson Christine Jardine. And if you know something is seriously wrong is happening at work, do you speak out or keep quiet? I'll talk with a man who blew the whistle and has been punished for it ever since. And his local MP will be with him. Give me your political briefing. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. The Prime Minister is in Belfast today, trying to encourage politicians there to get the Stormont government up and running again. Let's cross over to Belfast and get the latest from Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie. Doogie, just bring us up to date.
Well, the Prime Minister is arriving here this morning. He's chose to go to Hillsborough rather than Stormont. Now, optically, that's not good. It was his oven-ready deal, if you remember, to get Brexit done, the protocol that has actually caused Stormont to fall. The protocol is there basically to protect the integrity of the single market. In other words, it's a trade deal, an international trade deal that overrides an international peace agreement. For 30 years, Northern Ireland was basically at a sort of a civil war, I suppose. It was a totally different place to live. After the 1998 peace agreement, it was all based upon consent, and that the Act of the Union would not be broken without the people's word of that happening. Of course, the protocol breaks Article 6, the Act of the Union. It interrupts trade with the UK and Northern Ireland, with a border down the Irish Sea. But most importantly, it stops Northern Ireland making its own laws, because any divergence between Britain and Europe will be judged by the European Courts of Justice. And Unionists in Northern Ireland do not have any MEPs, so therefore they have no say in those laws, whereas Nationalists, of course, do have MEPs with their parties in Dublin. Over the weekend, things got a little bit worse. We had said on Friday, of course, that the pressure was going to go on to Dublin. It now has. You could see that with Simon Coveney, the Foreign Minister, saying it would cause problems with the Good Friday Agreement, it would cause problems inside his country. But on our front newspapers here, our front page headlines over the weekend was Protestant paramilitaries, unionist paramilitaries, and using terms like legitimate targets. That hasn't been used in nearly a quarter of a century here. I've noticed that you have Theresa Villiers on next, and she was one of the better Secretaries of State of Northern Ireland. She knew what the outworkings of the Good Friday Agreement were, and she let communities deal with it themselves. Unfortunately, the protocol has taken that ability away from the unionist communities, and they are now refusing to go into power with anyone because they see it as a colony and will not overlord, I suppose, the European courts. So it's all very, very sticky for Boris Johnson. I don't know how he's going to make this work, but one thing's for sure, they have no neutrals in this negotiation.
Busy day ahead for you, Doogie. Doogie BT, thank you. Now, if you've a teenager sitting A-levels and GCSEs over the next few weeks, good luck to them and to you and to the teachers who are taking them through. I'm delighted to be joined now by the Chair of the Education Select Committee and Conservative MP for Harlow, Robert Halfon. As always, a pleasure to see you, Robert Halfon. I was looking at the exams watchdog Ofqual statement that they put out on Friday. And I'd wonder if you'd give us some help in digesting it and making sense of it. They said, we want to get back to pre-pandemic grading, but don't think it would be fair to do so in one jump. So in 2022, results are likely to be higher than in 2019, but lower than we saw in 2021. Just explain this for us, Robert.
Well, first of all, can I just wish every good luck to all pupils and students doing exams. So here's a confession to you. Gloria, as chair of the Education Committee, I didn't enjoy exams as a child, had enormous anxiety and drank about probably 200 cups of coffee, revising all night often before the exams took place. I was really relieved when I didn't have to do them anymore. I'm glad that they're taking place, however. I do think there is a place for exams and continuous assessment in our education system. I actually support the approach of the government and Ofqual, because what they're basically doing is saying that because we didn't have exams over the past 2 years, they're going to peg the results, the grading between, I think, roughly between 2019 and what happened previously. So I think it's fair, given that students haven't had exams. A lot of students have missed school. We still have this issue of the so-called ghost children. We know that something like 13,000 children in exam years have not even returned to school since schools reopened. There are a lot of kids who've been at school but have had to miss it for one reason or another. So I think that this is a fair approach.
School and college leaders, some at least, are raising the challenges in recruiting exam invigilators this year. What is the cause of that, and what should the government be doing about it to make sure that we don't have a crisis in who's going to mark those exams?
Well, most schools, thank goodness, have gone back, are fully open, and things are getting back to normal. There may be invigilators who've been away or because of COVID, or there might be COVID-related issues, or they might be caring for somebody. Of course, where the government can offer support with the local authorities. I think this is primary responsibility of the local authorities, where the government can step in, offer support for local authorities to make sure that there are the exam invigilators that are needed. And any school that has problems should contact the DfE or their local authority to try and get the support that they need.
We go on to the cost of living. I just feel like I want to know more about your stressful exams. Did you do well, even though you had to stay up all night and drink 200 cups of coffee to get there?
Yeah. So I did. I managed to get 8 O levels, as it was in those days. I sound really old now. Although I got 5 initially and had to retake maths, somehow I got down from an E to a C, which I still can't work out how I managed to do that. Again, this is top secret because I'm supposed to pretend that I'm very clever as chair of the education committee. But always maths was a tough one for me. I did A levels and what was then known as scholarship levels, which weren't AS levels. They were sort of something higher than A levels. And I did politics and history. Surprise, surprise, I got a scholarship in politics. But I never enjoyed them. And it was only when I did my master's degree, which had a few exams, but mainly continuous assessment in the sense of writing theses and long essays, was when the first time I really started to enjoy my education.
I haven't not got my maths GCSE, so you're ahead of me. Confessions over though for now. Now, you are arguing for a windfall tax. You are a Conservative MP. You want a windfall tax to be introduced on energy companies. Both the Prime Minister and the Chancellor say they aren't that keen, though. They're refusing to rule it out, weirdly. So do you get the sense that it's going to happen?
Well, the oil companies made £40 billion of profits. The chief executives are getting multi-million pound salaries. One of them just recently had a £4.5 billion bonus. I described the oil bosses as the kind of new oligarchs because they're raking it in. They've made absolutely billions of pounds. And I do think it is the right thing to do because I think it would help raise a few £billion, which you could give back to the lower paid, either in the form of tax cuts or in the form of further energy rebates on top of what the government has done. I also think it's important to recognise that the government spent 20+ billion. There is a rebate on our council tax of £150 for most people, another rebate of £200 on our energy bills. They cut fuel duty by 5p. They raised the living wage. There's £1 billion that's gone to local councils that will help vulnerable people in each constituency who are really struggling. But I do think we need to do more. And I think the windfall tax, whilst not ideal, is one way of raising money without necessarily increasing the national debt. Because we've also got to remember that we have to pay £80 billion alone in interest fees on our debt this coming year. That's not even the debt itself, which is over £1 trillion, 80 billion. Now, just imagine if you had 80 billion to spend on cutting taxes or spending on the NHS and schools, how much better off we would be. So I recognise the government has to juggle balls, but I think a windfall tax is right. And I'm glad that the Chancellor has said that he doesn't rule it out.
And just finally, something else that has been ruled out by the government but may yet happen. They don't want to call it an emergency budget, but surely we'll get an announcement on further help before the autumn when that next budget is due.
Well, I don't mind what it's called, whether it's a statement, a budget, a press conference in Downing Street. I don't mind how it's done, but absolutely, my constituents in Harlow are struggling to pay their bills. I met an employee in a cafe only a week or so ago, and she said that she's working 7 days a week now because otherwise she couldn't afford to pay her bills, which means it's not just the financial impact, it means it impacts on her family life and her quality of life. And this is sadly the same is happening for millions of our people across the country. So I hope very much that they come up, either Prime Minister, the Chancellor, come up with a further package of help, particularly on energy bills or further tax cuts for the lower paid over the coming weeks, building on the tax cut because it's also worth noting that they did cut taxes in terms of national insurance for 70% of households. So they've done some good things which must be recognised, but a lot more needs to be done.
Robert Halfon, Conservative MP and Chair of the Education Select Committee, thank you. A government minister has been criticised this morning after suggesting that those struggling to make ends meet should simply get a better job, whether that's taking on more shifts or finding something with better pay. Rachel McLean made the comments on Sky News and was later asked to clarify what she meant here on GB News.
And the remarks that I made about people taking on more hours are part of our plan to help people get back into work. We've got a very good record of helping people get back into work after the COVID crisis, and also to enable them to, if they want to, and it's right for them, to increase their skills.
Well, here to talk about her response to that and her ideas for tackling the cost of living crisis is Christine Jardine, Treasury spokesperson for the Liberal Democrats. Good to see you again, Christine. I mean, does Rachel McLean have a point? There are lots of job vacancies. Maybe you can get a better paid job.
You know what? It just reminds me of Norman Tebbett's get on your bike and go and look for a job elsewhere. It's so out of touch with the reality of life for so many people in this country. It's easy to say, get a better job. And yes, there will be people who are thinking, I could get a better job, I could maybe work more hours, but that doesn't work for everybody. What about the single parents who can't work more hours? What about pensioners who are struggling in this? How, should they go back out to work at 75? And what about people who are struggling, who are genuinely struggling, who are already working as many hours as they can and are finding that the cost of living, their energy bills are just making life well nigh impossible at the moment? It shows that this government really has no empathy, I don't think, for the people in this country and the struggles that they're facing, doesn't understand and doesn't realise that what they really need is action to improve the economy. They need to stop dithering, introduce a windfall tax and just get on with trying to fix the mess that we're in.
And some Conservatives back the idea of a windfall tax. We just spoke to Robert Half on there. In your view, is that enough? Would that solve it? Would that be job done if we had that windfall tax on the energy companies and used the cash to help bring down bills?
Not on its own, no. What we also need is a cut in VAT from 20 to 17.5%, which would put money back in families' pockets. It would allow them to spend money. It would allow them to buy food. It would put money back into the economy. It would stimulate growth, which is what we're needing. At the moment, we're looking at a situation where all the forecasts are saying that it's going to get worse before it gets better, and that we are looking at a recession potentially later this year. Now, in order to avoid that, we have to have some stimulus in the economy, not just the cut in VAT, but we have to do something to put money in people's pockets, to encourage them to be spending and, keeping the high streets going. This was tried in 2008. Gordon Brown did it, and it improved growth by 1%. So we need to be looking at these things to help people through the crisis, but also to stimulate the economy and get some growth.
And I was looking at your manifesto at the last election. In that manifesto, admittedly, nearly 3 years ago, you said you'd put a penny in the pound on income tax that to raise cash for the NHS. Presumably that wouldn't be the right thing now?
Well, we don't know where we're going to be at the next general election, but right now we have a cost of living crisis, crisis in energy pricing, and what we need is fewer taxes on people. This government has, by stealth, increased the taxes that we're all paying, and has increased a massive hike in national insurance, which is hitting the lowest earning families worse than anybody else. Those who are already struggling have got this other blow to deal with. So no, at the moment, what we need is the windfall tax and a cut in VAT. And, Rishi Sunak has this 40 billion bonus coming in taxation that, he wasn't expecting, that has been paid. That should be invested in the people in this country, giving them some real help, not loaning us back our own money on, gambling that the price of energy will go down. No, we need real measures. We need the windfall tax. We need the cut in VAT. We need people to have money in their pockets to buy food, to pay their bills. And that's how we will help people in this country.
OK, just want to ask you about the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan. He has a new commission which he's just set up, which will aim to gather evidence to inform what he calls a serious debate about the UK's drug laws. Now, your last manifesto said you'd legalise cannabis. Is that still your view?
Well, I believe the war on drugs has failed abjectly. Glasgow has a terrible problem. Scotland has had record drugs deaths for the past few years. We need to start thinking about a different way to deal with the problem. The war on drugs has not done what people believed it would do. It hasn't helped the problem. And all we're doing is criminalising people by putting them into jail. And if they don't go in as a drug addict, very often they come out with a drugs problem. So I think we need to look at the problem differently. We need different solutions. And it's, it can't just be a big stick. That hasn't worked. We have to come up with another way of dealing with it. And the important thing about cannabis is that if we took cannabis out of the hands of the drugs gangs, if we regulated it, that's the key. It's not about legalizing, it's about regulating it so that you're able to control it and it doesn't become a way of drug gangs getting a hold of kids, teenagers, getting them involved in an illegal operation and criminalising people. So if we're going to have another look at this, yes, I think we do need to be thinking out of the box.
Christine Jardine, Liberal Democrat Treasury spokesperson, thank you, as ever. After the break, I'm joined by the Conservative MP for Crawley and passionate champion of animal welfare, Henry Smith.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather updates. A warm and humid day for most today. Some big thundery showers around this afternoon. And across much of Scotland, it's going to stay grey and wet. There's low pressure lurking in the Atlantic, but it's just kind of milling around here and throwing up warm and humid air from the south. Hence why we could see some big thunderstorms this afternoon, particularly over Wales and the Midlands, and then drifting northwards into Northern Ireland and parts of northern England. Some very heavy rain is possible in a short space of time. Meanwhile, the southern half of England turning largely dry this afternoon. We'll keep a lot of cloud and outbreaks of rain across Scotland. Quite a cold day in eastern Scotland, but elsewhere quite warm and humid, particularly if the sun pops out. Temperatures could get up to 23, maybe 24 Celsius, but still some very heavy showers around. Not great on the roads for this evening's rush hour. That's the M6 and the M5 in particular, but those thundery showers should ebb away. We'll always keep some cloud and rain across northern Scotland, but for most it becomes dry overnight. It's a little misty in places, temperatures holding up in double figures, so another pretty warm night. Notice out west though there is another band of rain that's going to edge in during Tuesday, spread across Northern Ireland, eventually into Wales and southwest England, and it'll turn wet during tomorrow afternoon in western parts of Scotland as well. Elsewhere, for many places, it's a fine day, staying quite misty and murky around the Northern Isles, but quite a bit of sunshine over central and eastern parts. And a warmer day, 25, 26, maybe even 27 Celsius. Obviously cooler with this rain further west. That could be quite heavy again by the end of the day. And then later tomorrow through the evening, a risk of further thundery showers coming up from France across parts of eastern England. So plenty going on this week. Low pressure remains out west. Weather fronts continue to drift in, but all the time warm air never too far away from parts of England. Plenty going on this week. Further thunderstorms likely.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here. Joe Biden walking out. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
We're a nation of animal lovers, but long-promised bans on the import of foie gras and fur have been dropped, and campaigners are angry. Henry Smith is the Conservative MP for Crawley and is part of the cross-party group for animal welfare in Parliament. He's very passionate about animal welfare. And please, he joins me now from Westminster. Good to see you, Henry. Why has that long-planned promise to ban the import of fur and foie gras been dropped?
Well, good to see you too, Gloria. A lot of legislation was passed in the last session, the Animal Sentience Bill, glue traps, banning of live animal exports for slaughter. So a lot has been achieved, and the Kept Animals Bill was carried over from the last session, will be considered in this current session as well. But I was concerned that there wasn't explicit reference in the Queen's speech to a banning of fur and foie gras imports. Both of those products are illegal to manufacture or to create in this country. Therefore, just simply importing them from abroad is just exporting that cruelty, and I think we should be consistent and do that. So myself and other like-minded colleagues will be tabling a number of amendments to animal welfare legislation as it comes forward in the coming months to try and rectify that.
It was reported that the reason that those particular policies were dropped was that Tory traditionalists complained that bans would be unconservative. Do you reckon those reports were correct?
Well, I think bans are probably the last thing that we should reach for. If we can get agreement, if we can get consensus on something, then that is always better, I think, than legislating. But the amount of cruelty that is experienced producing fur, and certainly the way that foie gras is produced, force-feeding geese and ducks until they have diseased livers to eat, really is quite disgusting. And I think it is right that if they're not seen as important enough to be able to create in this country, then we shouldn't be importing them as well. There will be differences of opinion on that, but I think most polls show that well over 3/4 of people in this country agree on such bans, and that's why I think it's important that that goes forward.
And finally, trophy hunting, another practice which many believe is a pretty sick trade, but no sign of the government backing the private members' bills brought in by John Spellar. The government keeps saying, yeah, we'll back that, but no sign of progress on that. Are you confident that it will come?
Well, trophy hunting, so-called trophy hunting, is absolutely abhorrent. There are many endangered species around the world, and the idea that people gain some sort of joy from shooting majestic animals that are endangered and then bringing back body parts is pretty disgusting. The government have said that they will back measures to ban the importation of trophy hunting, and I will be right in the front line in Parliament ensuring that the governments are as good as their word on that.
Finally. Yesterday, your colleague Jeremy Hunt was asked in an interview whether Boris Johnson is an honest man. Jeremy Hunt replied by saying talking about personalities is not a helpful thing to do. Would a yes or no answer have been preferable?
I can't speak for other colleagues. That's for Jeremy to make his own judgments on those sorts of questions.
I'm sure you would say he is an honest man.
I think he is an honest man. I think the Prime Minister is honest. For that matter, generally speaking, I think Keir Starmer is an honest person. I think one of the problems with the lockdown regulations that were brought in, it was bound to catch people up in the most sort of mundane of situations, whether eating a slice of birthday cake or having a beer after work. And that's one of the reasons why I didn't vote for the renewal of the coronavirus legislation, beyond all the other health issues being neglected and the damage to the economy that we're still seeing and we're still suffering from. So I think there's a lesson that for future pandemics, let's hope there aren't any, but for future ones, we don't need to reach for the statute book and take away people's civil liberties.
Henry Smith, Conservative MP for Crawley, always a pleasure to have you on the show, and I'm sure we will talk more about animal welfare soon. Thank you for joining us. Next, I'll discuss the Northern Ireland Protocol with former Secretary of State Theresa Villiers, plus call for more protection for whistleblowers. I'll be joined by the Conservative MP Kevin Hollinrake and his constituent Ian Foxley, who blew the whistle and is paying the price for it. First, it's the news with Rosie.
Good afternoon, it's 12:33. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. The Prime Minister's spokesman says the government believes it can make significant changes to the Northern Ireland Protocol within the original protocol framework. Well, it's after Boris Johnson is due to hold emergency talks with Northern Ireland leaders today in a bid to try and break the deadlock at Stormont. McDonald's says it started a process to sell its business in Russia. It follows the fast food giant closing all restaurants there in March, having operated in the country for 30 years. McDonald's says the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine has meant it's no longer tenable to continue business in Russia. Sweden will send diplomats to Turkey today in an attempt to overcome their objections to the Scandinavian nation joining NATO. Applications for new membership require unanimous approval from all existing NATO members. Sweden is expected to make a formal bid today, following Finland confirming it would apply for membership yesterday. The Queen received a standing ovation on the last day of the Royal Windsor Horse Show. She was there for a star-studded celebration of her Platinum Jubilee in the grounds of Windsor Castle. It's her first public outing since March, having missed the state opening of Parliament due to mobility issues. You're up to date on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. Shortly, we'll be back to the briefing with Gloria.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The Prime Minister is in Belfast today trying to get the Northern Irish Assembly back up and running. It comes after some conciliatory noises from the Prime Minister this weekend, suggesting that a solution to the dispute with the EU over Northern Ireland might be able to be resolved within the existing deal. Let's bring in Theresa Villiers, the former Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. Theresa Villiers, it's great to have you on the show. It's the first time we've spoken. You're very welcome to the show. Why use the threat of unilaterally scrapping part of the Brexit deal that we signed rather than negotiate with the EU? Isn't that pose a risk of heightening tensions?
I'm sure negotiations will continue, but they've been ongoing for months, and we're now seeing serious political instability in Northern Ireland. We have to act, and if the EU continues to be rigid in terms of the negotiations, then I'm afraid we need to act unilaterally. And what I understand of what the Foreign Secretary is going to be bringing forward, that is a reasonable compromise that would deal with many of the issues and problems caused by the protocol, but would also ensure that the integrity of the single market is respected.
Simon Coveney, Ireland's foreign minister, speaking over the weekend, said there's no way the EU can compromise because of the UK's position if the UK is threatening unilateral action to pass domestic legislation to set aside international obligations. I guess it's the same point. It's inflaming rather than resolving a situation, and that makes it harder for the EU to compromise.
But if you actually look at the protocol, itself contemplates that it could be replaced. It also has sort of safety valve provisions for the event that there's political instability or trade diversion. Both of those apply here. And also, the protocol was negotiated under Article 50, which, according to EU law, can only deliver temporary arrangements, not permanent ones. So what the government is now proposing to do goes with the grain of what is in the protocol. Yes, it disapplies aspects of it, but we cannot stand by and see part of our country without a devolved government. We do need to take action to ensure that the integrity of our own single market in our own country is respected. And I think this is a reasonable way forward in response to the EU's unreasonable approach to how the protocol has been implemented.
What does the Prime Minister say today when he meets with all the leaders, but particularly in this case, Michelle O'Neill, the Vice President of Sinn Féin, which won the elections? And she says, I will be telling Boris Johnson that unilateral action deepens political instability and economic certainty and must not happen. The danger is that you provide music to the ears of unionist politicians and antagonise Sinn Féin, who won that election. How does he avoid doing that?
Well, clearly he'll be making it clear that this is a government that represents and looks after the interests of all communities in Northern Ireland. And what I hope he will also say is that he's going to bring forward this robust legislation which will deal with some of the very real practical problems which the protocol is causing. And even on the nationalist side and with other political parties outside the unionist side of things, there is some disquiet about, for example, the full effect of how the protocol would operate without the grace periods which are currently in place. So he will have a difficult path to tread, but there is real concern that actually when the protocol was negotiated, concern was recognised in relation to the nationalist community in the north-south border, but not properly listened to in relation to checks which are taking place in relation to the Irish Sea. So we need to rebalance things to build cross-community consent for the arrangements with the European Union, which at the moment is lacking. And cross-community consent on important issues like this is very much a part of the principles underlying the Belfast Good Friday Agreement.
You say robust legislation is on the way, but that's going to face some parliamentary resistance, certainly face scrutiny, but also possible resistance on your own side in the Commons and the Lords. It's going to take months, perhaps even a year, to pass the legislation.
There will be opposition from some quarters, which is one of the reasons why the point I want to emphasise is that this is a reasonable way forward. And actually, I think arguably it's the European Union which is in the wrong here, because it is seeking to impose, the same level of checks which are designed for massive shipments of goods from outside the European Union, many of which come from countries with much lower regulatory standards than we have. Border-related checks and controls are supposed to be dependent on evidence risk. They're supposed to be proportionate. And it simply isn't proportionate to impose that same level of scrutiny and checks to GB, to Northern Ireland trade, as it is to the rest of the world. As I've emphasised, it is possible to deliver arrangements which are every bit as compliant as the EU's other external borders, but does so without the excessive bureaucracy which the European Union has been trying to impose on us. After all, the Northern Ireland chief vet said that if we fully implemented the protocol, it was likely that there would be as many food compliance certificates issued in Northern Ireland as anywhere else on the EU's external border. That has to be disproportionate, and it helps justify what the UK government is proposing to do.
We have you, Theresa Villiers, about your colleague the Minister Rachel Maclean, who has done a broadcast round this morning, and in one of those interviews she said that people who are struggling could look at upping their hours or getting a different job. She's coming under quite a bit of political attack for that. Does it sound a bit tone deaf to you?
I don't know what the minister said, I'm afraid. The question takes me by surprise, so I wouldn't want to comment on that. But what I do know is it's vital as part of our efforts to tackle the cost of living to create the well-paid jobs, high-skill, well-paid jobs are crucial in order to give people the opportunities and successes they need, as well as helping bring in more money so that cost of living pressures are eased.
Theresa Villiers, former Northern Ireland Secretary, really good to get your insight today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, it's time for our constituency surgery. Conservative MP Kevin Hollinrake has been working with his constituent Ian Foxley, who was a whistleblower, to extend and protect those who have come forward. And both join me now. Kevin Hollinrake, Conservative MP for Thurston Moulton, in the studio with me, and his constituent, the CEO of Parasia. Please correct my mispronunciation. You'll be very welcome. And we're going to talk about what happened to you. I'm going to start with you, Ian, so as well as correcting my pronunciation. Tell us what happened to you about 11 years ago.
Good morning, Gloria. Thank you for having me. It's Parrhesia, by the way, but
Thank you.
Don't quote me because I'm not a classical Greek scholar. I only came across it in course of researching my PhD, which interestingly is on the topic of why people do not speak up. What happened to me 11 years ago was that I was the programme director for a multi-billion pound contract between the UK government and the government of Saudi Arabia to rebuild the communications for their National Guard, until I came across corrupt payments to offshore bank accounts. And I wouldn't be part of it, and blew the whistle and got threatened with arrest and jail by a senior member of the royal family and my own managing director in Riyadh, which is where I was at the time. And fled the country overnight, I think is probably the best way, and then reported it to the Serious Fraud Office, and have been battling for 11 years to actually get it brought to court. So it actually resulted last year in the company pleading guilty and being fined 28 million and 2 million costs. And it triggered a greater investigation into the Airbus group, which resulted in them declaring another 10 cases of corruption, being fined 3.6 billion euros. So a victory in a way.
And Ian, part of the reason why we do these constituency surgeries on the show is to show the other side of an MP's working. Just tell me when you got in touch with your MP and what happened as a result of that.
Actually, about 8 years ago, very soon after he was elected to the constituency of Thirsk-Malton. And I have to say, he'll get embarrassed in a moment, but he's been absolutely fantastic. He's been a great supporter. He's an honest MP. He's fabulous. And he feels for the topic. He's the chair of the all-party parliamentary group on fair business banking. He's fighting anti-corruption. He's the co-chair of the APPG on whistleblowing. And he really feels for those of us who are put in a really difficult place by coming across wrongdoing and taking that step forward to tell the truth about it.
I'm going to bring Kevin in now. He's not blushing too much. Kevin, those were really lovely remarks about your involvement in the case. Just tell me what your recollection was when Ian, your constituent, first came to you with this.
Well, I was quite shocked, really. I mean, first of all, I'm shocked that anybody would blow the whistle because you just don't get looked after. I mean, he's done a fantastic job. What Ian and people like him are doing is making the system fair. The system should be fair. And if corrupt payments are influencing behaviour, contracts, for example, that's not fair on businesses who pitch for those contracts, and it's not fair on the taxpayer because they're not getting value for money. And we see this time and time again. We do an awful lot of work on the all-party group on fair business banking, on economic crime, trying to make this stuff fair. And we see so many examples where it's not fair, but everything that comes to the surface all comes from people like Ian who blow the whistle. Now, what we don't do in this country, we don't look after those people. Ian's had 11 years. He was on a very well-paid job, 11 years without a single penny. We get this company into court, the Serious Fraud Office get a conviction. They don't do that every day. 28 million pounds in sanctions, some of which goes into the Treasury, and Ian doesn't get a penny. Not compensated at all, not protected properly. We've got to change the rules in the UK so that these people get properly protected and properly compensated.
And just tell us what the chances are of changing both those things. I know there are moves, this private members bill or a 10-minute rule bill, which is going through at the moment. Yes, is the government going to back that, and how would that help whistleblowers? And then secondly, to your second point, on the compensation, that Ian, 11 years without anything.
And it's not unusual. You see this time and time again. You speak to whistleblowers, many of who have contemplated suicide because of the pressure they put under, often by the companies that they're blowing the whistle within. You think these people would be welcomed in terms of bringing forward this information. That's not the case at all. So yes, Mary Robinson, who's the co-chair of the all-party group on whistleblowing, I work alongside her. She's brought forward some legislation. The government's looking at it. We've had several meetings with them. It's ambitious, and the government has concerns about some of it, but I think he's very sympathetic to the overall plight of whistleblowers, and we need to improve some of the rules. So I think we'll get some change, but we're probably a bit more ambitious for change than perhaps the government is at this point in time. But if we're going to crack economic crime, and let's look at the implications of economic crime, and we see it now in full view with Ukraine, because the reason Putin has got a war machine is because he's got people around him that are very wealthy, oligarchs, and those people are economic criminals. This is what we're identifying. This is how important this is. And we need to actually crack this. One of the key things we need is proper whistleblower protection and compensation. It's one of the key elements of cracking economic crime.
And back to you, Ian, how have you coped without, walking away from your job, not getting compensation, not being able to earn in the same way? It's awful.
Well, I can't pretend that it's been easy at all. It hasn't. Fundamentally, I've got a fantastic wife who has backed me and stood by me, and I think that's key to any whistleblower is the the comfort that your family and support that your family and close friends can provide is an absolute bedrock for going forward. And then you have to find something to do to, feed the mortgage, make the bank manager happy, and keep your wife happy, quite frankly, and the children fed.
Well, do you know what I was going to ask next? Having everything that Ian has gone through, I just wanted to ask, if he'd have known the consequences of doing the right thing, would he have done it?
No.
Have you chatted through that?
I've asked him that question and lots of other whistleblowers. And as I say, every case we've dealt with of economic crime has originated from these people. What we're putting together is an economic crime manifesto together with the all-party group, another all-party group, on anti-corruption and responsible taxation. That's Margaret Hodge.
Yes.
This is a cross-party issue, massive. It's a big manifesto. We've got a launch on the 25th of May. There's so many things we need to put in there that we have listed all different measures. But to me, one of the most important ones is whistleblower reform.
Ian, thank you. Sorry about what happened, but I'm really pleased that you are back. I was just going to ask you, if you had known the consequences of blowing the whistle, would you have done it, knowing what the personal consequences for you for the next 11 years would be?
Yes, is a very straightforward, very clear answer. I would, but I would have done it slightly differently. I wouldn't have done it in Riyadh. I'd have got myself out to UK and make sure that I was totally safe physically, because the threat of immediate jail and everything that comes thereafter in a foreign country is something you don't really contemplate when you think about blowing the whistle. I tried to take risk mitigation measures, but they weren't good enough. I got betrayed, and I just had to get out quick. But fundamentally, it's a matter of values. I could not have lived with myself if I had signed up to and been part of the corrupt process. My wife often says, I wish you could have done something else. And I understand that. But my riposte is, me. It's not in my blood. It's not in my soul. I couldn't do it. But
have you had the chance? Oh, sorry, forgive me. Please continue, Ian.
You just live with it, and I will not be a victim. And my message to whistleblowers is, don't be a victim. You've done the right thing. It's up to the system now to protect us and frankly compensate us for the detriment that you receive, because you lose your job, but you also lose your future career. And you don't quite understand that when you blow the whistle. So, the system ought to pay you back. Now, I'm not asking for rewards. I don't agree with rewarding people and offering people a financial reward for whistleblowing, because I think that sets up the wrong motivations and leaves you open to accusations of just doing it for the money. But I do think you ought to have a proper system of compensation that actually rebalances your life. If you want a reward, then use the civil list. That's how we reward good citizens in this country. Perhaps do that. But no, compensation actually would make my wife feel happier, I know.
Your wife seems pretty extraordinary, and it's no doubt been an ordeal for her too. Thank you for bringing the issue of whistleblowing to you both, to our constituency in Surgery today. Thank you. Thank you. You have been watching The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. I'm back every Monday to Thursday from noon. Up next, it's On the Money with Liam Halligan. But for now, I will leave you with your weather.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather updates. A warm and humid day for most today. Some big thundery showers around this afternoon. And across much of Scotland, it's going to stay grey and wet. There's low pressure lurking in the Atlantic, but it's just kind of milling around here and throwing up warm and humid air from the south. Hence why we could see some big thunderstorms this afternoon, particularly over Wales and the Midlands, and then drifting northwards into Northern Ireland and parts of northern England. Some very heavy rain is possible in a short space of time. Meanwhile, the southern half of England turning largely dry this afternoon, We'll keep a lot of cloud and outbreaks of rain across Scotland. Quite a cold day in eastern Scotland, but elsewhere quite warm and humid, particularly if the sun pops out. Temperatures could get up to 23, maybe 24 Celsius, but still some very heavy showers around. Not great on the roads for this evening's rush hour. That's the M6 and the M5 in particular, but those thundery showers should ebb away. We'll always keep some cloud and rain across northern Scotland, but for most it becomes